Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for this week's Friday Morning GM on 8/14/26. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Vas Lerikos. Vas, how you doing?
Life is good, Ken. Looking forward to the preseason opener on Saturday night. And after a good run of luck, injury luck, had a scary week, but hopefully nothing too serious.
Yeah, we'll talk through that, and there is some real good news from camp today, and a few things came on. But they had originally 6 players on PUP. We've talked about that before. Only one guy remains on PUP. That's Teddy Buchanan, who they were the most gushing about his recovery and pace of it and whatnot. But we're still unsure about his exact return. We haven't gotten any good word on that yet. All the others are practicing. With one exception, in 11 on 11s. The key exception is Nnamdi Madubuike, which we talked about a little bit. He's done some side work, but he hasn't even done any sled work yet.
Yeah, I mean, it's on the slow ramp up for sure. I hope he's going to at least start hitting the sled next week in preparation for the season. At some point, you got to test it and see if he's going to be able to hold up or not so you can make roster decisions accordingly.
Yeah, absolutely, and I don't think there's any question about that. They need to figure it out. I'd almost say at this point I don't think he plays in the preseason at all, based on where they are. I think his chance to start the regular season on the roster is significantly lower than I would have said after he ran out the very first day of camp off PUP.
Right, and maybe this is a IR-DTR situation. You have to find a handshake guy, obviously, to do that. Not the worst thing in the world. They have a lot of bodies on defensive line now.
I believe they get 2 of free IR-DTRs now.
You're right.
So they have that to lean on. Now the Ravens, it's good because the Ravens don't really have a single handshake guy on the roster now that they can easily go to. But like Washington has $750,000 in guaranteed money, and
how about Smythe? Does he have guaranteed? I thought it was prohibitive amount.
I don't know that $350,000 for Jenkins is a prohibitive amount, or $750,000 for Washington, but I think Smythe might have more. Smythe have might make it about $2 million. There just isn't anybody. I mean, the guy who would be perfect for it would be Chris Moore, but it has to, or Kayvon Wallace, but it has to be a guy who's actually going to make the roster. I think both those guys aren't going to make it. So it doesn't make sense otherwise.
But no, you're right. They changed that rule last year. I think it was last year to have the two freebies, right?
Might have been a couple of years ago, and then they continued it. It was a positive thing. So anyway, Madubuike is still doing a little side conditioning. We can't take pictures of it, so we got to be careful about that kind of stuff. And anyway, it's the sled work. It's been really good because we can see Travis Jones hitting the sled really hard, and John Jenkins hitting the sled, but unfortunately, Madubuike he teased us.
That the Jones addition back to practice was great to see. He was the big man, obviously, that we were waiting on, and he looks full strength. I mean, it was apparently a pectoral injury, but I heard Minter at the podium say he was working in the weight room, so it looks like it was, he's far enough past the issue that it shouldn't hinder him entering the season.
Right. I don't think so at all. I mean, if he's in 11s now, normally, there's no reason why it would hinder him during the season. So I think that we're in a very good position to expect Travis Jones to be playing in the opener. I don't see a reason why not. I also don't think he'll play during the preseason just because he's Travis Jones and there's really no need for it. But
that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see if Minter gives any of the, I think he called them the established starters. They're not going to play this week, but they could get a series or two up at some point. Who knows? Because it's not guaranteed that he's going to kind of take the full bubble wrap approach of his predecessor.
Yeah, obviously Harbaugh got kind of burned by it with the injuries to both running backs happening in a single practice. There's an incredible bit of bad luck happening at one time, but
Well, that was the Marcus Peters and Gus Edwards on, I think, 2 consecutive plays, closed practice right before the season. But the big one was the Dobbins, where it was a little swing pass, and he came down on his knee, and he hasn't played a full season since.
Yeah. Anyway, awful stuff. Corey Bullock is off of NFI. He's now a full go. So he's in there, playing the offensive line. He's actually played a couple different positions, but we're not supposed to talk about exact specifics of what unit he's playing with. But it did come out in Minter's press conference today that he might play center or guard in the first preseason game. And one of the weird things that has happened, which, by the way, I think that's ideal anyway. You want Bullock's versatility to play center or guard if you're going to keep him on the roster. And he would be occupying probably a 10th roster spot to be there.
Yeah, I think we've touched on a previous show. If there is a 10th lineman, he's probably the front runner for that, because Gwynn doesn't have the guard versatility as Bullock. And as far as I know, and I didn't see practice reports from today, Wednesday, Poshik is still not in 11s, or is he? Has he been allowed to participate?
Yeah, I think he's in 11s. He's
okay.
There are other elements about who he's playing with
that
I'm not supposed to get into, but he's also he's all of the centers. As far as I know, every single one of the centers has had some time at another position as well.
Okay.
So it's part of the issue with having so many guys. Maybe Pinter is not. I'm not 100% sure of it. But in any case, with having so many guys who are like center only players in theory, or that's where they're primarily competing among your 16 offensive linemen, in order to field 3 complete units, you need to have some other players playing out of position effectively. And they've done some of that. So I won't go into it any further than that. But they
one thought on Pochik. I saw Wired last night, the episode they put out. He's taller than Ronnie Stanley. He's a big man.
Yeah, he's about 6'5", right?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure, but shoulder to shoulder, he's taller than Ronnie.
Yeah, he's a very unusual body for an interior offensive lineman because he has an extreme vertical build. And the guys who you do see that with 6'5", 6'6" centers. Occasionally, the Texans had a guy for a while who was like that. When you have that kind of frame, it makes you a little bit more susceptible to pad level of defensive tackle. So it's not a good thing, actually. If you got the better arm like that of it, then that'd be another matter. But he's that size is a problem in general for centers.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, we had some good news today come out on 2 absolutely massive injuries from the last few practices. So you'll remember that Marlon Humphrey left the field after a long coverage rep yesterday. There's no contact on the injury. Sometimes that's even more scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then Nate Wiggins previously had left practice after a collision with Jalen Hawkins. And that had all happened over about the last 3 practices. And incredibly, Minter says they avoided any kind of serious damage. The no structural problem note had already come out about Wiggins, but you're still thinking, well, wait a minute, that still could be an MCL problem that keeps him out 8 weeks,
mm-hmm.
kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Minter saying both of them should be back next week.
Yes. Great news. Wiggins in particular seemed particularly scary. He was carted off. They said he was in agonizing pain. Anytime somebody's carted off, you figure it's got to be an ACL or something serious. And then Humphrey the next day, I think it was the very next day, and those are your 2 boundary or field side, boundary side starting corners, to lose them back to back, and you don't know. So it's great news. I will say having them now dealing with something even minor is not great. Humphrey said in the past, he enters season, you have something bothering you, then something else pops up, and it kind of snowballs, and it has affected his play. And Wiggins was really from what I heard, was only ascent really to becoming a top 5-10 corner in the league this year. So this could be somewhat of a setback, but certainly great that they're not going to miss the season or any great length of time.
Yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm just overjoyed, frankly, with the news about it today. They got 2 other good pieces of news today, by the way, too. Zay Flowers had been out, another collision victim of Jalen Hawkins's,
mm-hmm.
and he came back and had his first full 11-on-11 work today. He was actually back in practice previously, and I think he might have run some routes, but not even a 1-on-1 route. But he was in regular 11-on-11s today, so he's full go.
Great.
And Rashad Bateman had missed the last 2 practices as well. So it's really like 4 great pieces of injury information. And so I mean, the horseshoe is still stuck up Minter's rear end at this point in terms of really great injury luck. And hey, I'm happy to have it there, frankly, with what's going on.
Oh, for sure, for sure. He seems to be cautious about if it's something minor, don't make him play through it. And he said nicks and bruises or something, but even if they have something small, give him a couple of days off. There's no reason to push him at this point. So far it's working. We'll see. It's a collision sport. Injuries are bound to happen at some point. We've had the Ravens have had tremendous injury luck, positive in recent seasons. They've had tremendous negative luck in recent seasons. So sort of a luck of the draw kind of thing. But so far so good.
Yeah. All right. So we're going to talk about the depth charts today. And we've got 3 to do for you over the course of a show. We're going to have to split in 2, but we're going to talk about the cornerback and safety depth in this first group. And I thought we'll put off any other discussions about camp stuff. They may come up during the discussion of these groups. But let's look at the cornerback depth first. And I think this position is actually riding some on the safety group, which we'll talk about second. Unless you want to flip it and do the safeties first. In some ways, it's probably easier to talk safety. Okay.
Sure. Let's do that. Whatever you like.
Talk safety. We'll do safety first. So the Ravens have, in my mind, 4 absolute locks among the safeties. Hamilton, Starks, Hawkins, and Keandre Jackson, I think, is beyond a lock at this point. And then the 5th safety would be Kayvon Wallace. And I think he's, it's an optional, it's a choice. It would be a player they could have on the roster, but they could also have a 7th cornerback instead. And I kind of think that would maybe make more sense.
I would agree with that. I would prefer 7 corners. That injury, as we saw this week, very injury-prone position. Ozzie has the famous quote, "You can never have enough corners." From 10, 15 years ago, you had that saying. Locks, obviously, Kyle Hamilton, the best safety in the NFL. Malachi Starks, a player hoping for a second-year leap. I've heard good things, reports about him from camp. A player that I think could, accumulate a nice interception total hypothetically this coming season. Jesse Minter, I heard, say he expects to have average at least 1 interception per game from the defense this year. He said that in one of the team meetings. Jalen Hawkins, who seems to be right in the middle of the action of every collision and play, and they keep saying he played in the Super Bowl last year. I think he's a strong addition to really have a good top 3 there of guys that have some versatility, but are coverage guys. They're not box safeties, any of them. Mm-hmm. And then Keandre Jackson, who's ascending, who's going to be probably the special teams captain. And I know from your reports, he's done well in the back end as well.
Yeah, he's been terrific in that. Let's go through these players individually here. So we've talked about the need to keep Hamilton up, playing that slot corner role. I think that even though the Ravens have other options at slot corner that include Humphrey as well as Martin and Jackson, Martin and Rivers, who we'll talk about on the corner group, I still think it's very important that Hamilton plays either dime back or slot corner. I just think he provides the Ravens with so much more in those 2 spots. Not a matter of do they have other options, and it's a matter of they really want to make sure they're not forced into some bad option by having to push Hamilton back because of injury, which has happened basically every year, that they've had to move him to the back end to make up for an injury that occurred back there. Marcus Williams was a big part of that at one point, and then the guy from the Bears that they picked up, Eddie Jackson, was not playing well, and they had to move him and Ardarius Washington back. You don't want that. So I think they've got a pretty good chance for these guys not to let them down. And Keandre Jackson is the piece that they really have needed for a long time, which is a 4th guy who can come in and supplement them in whatever way is necessary to keep Hamilton in his regular role, as long as Hamilton is not the one getting injured.
Yes, well said, well said. And Hamilton, he was shaken up a few times last year. He's tall, but he's not as necessarily muscular as some of the players in the trenches. So it is something to be, think about. Ideally, I would hope that the Ravens are playing a good bit of dime this season. Of course, that depends on the offense. But with Hamilton as the dime backer, I think that would be 6 defensive backs on the field, gives you maximum flexibility as far as coverage. And I don't think you're losing very much in the run game with Hamilton filling in for the will.
in a dime snap, you're inherently not losing anything in the run game because you're bringing them in an obvious passing down, or in a game script situation. And this is where the 2019 and 2000 Ravens piled up dime snaps because they had a game script situation that says, "I dare you to run the ball. Go ahead and run the clock out on yourself," kind of thing.
I remember that the 49ers, that monsoon game, and Wink went to dime and basically dared San Fran to run it, and to going into halftime, and I think they got a field goal out of it instead of a touchdown. So I like that strategy. I'm always a fan of that strategy.
Yeah. Against against the Rams was the kind of the apex of the strategy, because I think they played, not only did they play dime, but they played race car dime for like the entire fourth quarter, even on first down. And that was really fantastic.
That was a Monday Night Football Jackson 5 game, right?
Yeah, 45-6. There you go. So Eric Weddle called it they peeled our faces off, is what he said. All right. So anyway, those four safeties I think are a lock. And by the way, you talked about Keandre Jackson. He's been one of the superstars of camp so far. It's been really, Jackson and Martin in the defensive backfield have both been outstanding, and Rivers has made a bunch of plays too. So I wouldn't leave him out of the group, but just Jackson and Martin have head and shoulders above the rest. Kayvon Wallace could potentially be a handshake guy, but if he's not making the team, he doesn't have any use in that specific role. But I think there's tremendous use in keeping him as your fifth safety at the top of the practice squad.
Yep.
And I'd almost feel certain with injuries at safety that he'd be needed at some time during the year.
Yeah, I think that's a very good, assumption. I think he's a veteran. He knows his way around the league. I'm not sure what he really offers on special teams. If he was a special teams ace, maybe it would make sense to keep him on the 53. But I think as a 54th or 55th or 56th man, that's a good place to be.
Well, if he's going to be the fourth safety going into any game, and I think if he were elevated, that would be the reason. Then it would be primarily a special teams role. And I think he's playing special teams. I'm not watching this. More of what I watch in special teams in camp is how they build up individual special teams reps. How is Levine doing it? Does he try and have individual man reps, building up to half line reps, building up to full line reps? Is he using the jugs gun or not on ones that involve kick? So are you getting a real read on the return man? Is that sort of thing? I'm not looking at individual blocking on those plays, generally speaking.
Yeah, I'll reference Wired again because you're out there every day at camp. You have the firsthand knowledge. But the only real thing I noticed from that episode was that they like Smythe. That he's really good at lane integrity on special teams.
That's good.
And also Mickens had a prominent role in this week's episode as far as just the details that Kyle Hamilton was talking about, just going through the details of coverage with the corners and the safeties. Mickens is really looking like a star.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. And Hamilton certainly has made reference to that at the podium, talking about how he's not just an install king. And when you use languages like that, he's being unguarded about his speech. He really means that, because otherwise he wouldn't use a pejorative term, or what he considers to be a pejorative term that might otherwise apply. And he says, he's much more about technique. That's very rare. It's much rarer in the NFL than you would think. And I thought that was just very telling about Mickens. But he played for Mickens at Notre Dame. He clearly loves him before he even showed up here.
Yep.
And just go through the rest of the safety group real quickly. They have two other guys. Jacquez Robinson has been actually hurt the last few days, I think 3 in a row now. Silas Walters has been burned a bunch of times, but today he made a big play and had a pick 6 off a tip from Wester, and took it, obviously took it to the house if it's a pick 6, right? So, but neither of those guys is I don't think either of them is either a candidate to be on the 53 or even the practice squad. I think there's not room for either.
Yeah, I think one safety on the P squad is probably a good use of resources. All right. Before we move on, Ken, there was another transaction we forgot to mention. Skylar Thompson to IR, and
good point.
And Declan Doyle's former backup for the Bears, name's escaping me, was brought in.
Austin Reed.
Austin Reed. So,
AR-15, he's known as here because of he wears number 15.
oh, okay, very good. Only heavy barrels are allowed in Maryland, but so uh, yeah, you have to be careful putting too many guys on IR because they'll start counting against the cap. You hate when a guy
Of
that's not going to
course.
make it's not going to make the 53 lands on IR because it's just money. It's just wasted money.
Yeah,
Wasted
if you seriously think that an injury, and I'm not talking about you, Voss, because you know better, but I'm talking about any of the listeners out there. If you see an injury in the second half, your words out of your mouth should be "oh crap"
yeah.
or other appropriate expletive, because that it will cost the Ravens, the bulk of an annual salary that they have to pay him against the cap. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. So we ready to move on to let's talk about the economy of four. Do we have to talk enough? We could. I guess we've covered it before, but you get to keep 7 corners, presumably, if you can cut yourself to 4 safeties,
Or maybe an extra D lineman because that's a place where they kind of have extra bodies. I remember specifically there was a year. I don't remember exactly what year it was. It was probably in the end of the Flacco era where they carried 6 safeties on the opening week 153, which was obviously a little bit of overkill. 5 they've done a good bit of, but 4 is where you want to be, especially if you have some corners who maybe have some cross trainability at safety.
That's the big thing. Is I think TJ Tampa, who's looked great this camp, by the way, could be a guy who could move to safety, and Marlon Humphrey is a guy who maybe at some point, if he were to be as ineffective as he was last year, and the Ravens have other options, their depth doesn't take a big hit during the season, I could see him moving to safety during the season.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
He has a skill set
right.
for it. Yep. All right, so let's get into corners. Go ahead.
All right. So why don't you start us on this one?
Okay, so Nate Wiggins, Marlon Humphrey are obviously locks. I've heard some discussion that Humphrey could be released because he has such a bloated salary. The problem is most of that's guaranteed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
They could have done it months ago in March, hypothetically, but at this point it's all guaranteed. Chido Awuzie, veteran, played very well last season, and I've heard great thoughts about Tampa, so I would consider them all 4 locks. I also, based on the reports I've heard, will consider Kenyon Martin a lock at this point. He seems to be a real playmaker and really taken to this scheme and making a lot of plays at this point.
Yeah, so Keon Martin, I think he probably is a lock. I put him in a in competition group. Rivers, so Rivers is a direct competitor of his. So let's go back for a moment to the big 4, talk about them for a second, and then we'll come back to the competitor group. So Wiggins got to be the number 1 corner for the Ravens, and he's critical because he's the biggest piece in terms of easy rebuild to the 2027 unit. You really need to think about extending him and making him the centerpiece in your corner room going forward. Whereas Humphrey and Awuzie are the next 2 guys. They're 1 year effectively band-aids to this situation. They then have to make a decision about them in 27. So while both are should make the team, I think Awuzie has played well enough that he should be there. Humphrey, I'm not sure I could say the same thing. They did have a pick yesterday, by the way, in practice, which was nice. And Tampa has really stood out. He's finding the football. He had a little bit of Brandon Stevens-itis, that he wasn't finding the ball in the same way, and he was trying to attack the catch point. This year, been much better at finding the football in the air, trying to make a play there. And not that he can't do the other things too. He is an extremely big and physical corner. The Ravens love their aircraft carriers. Tampa is the best example of that. Wiggins is long and lean, and Humphrey is big, but he's a little slower. Tampa also is has some speed issues, but he's really he's a thumper, very much, even more so in the Humphrey mode.
I'm excited to see what Tampa has this season. We haven't seen him in extended action necessarily, but you're right. Wiggins and Tampa are both entering their third season, so they both be eligible for early extensions following next offseason.
Right, and I don't see a world in which they do that for Tampa, but who knows? Maybe they decide they want to do it early if they want the room to be around those two guys. One question about Tampa would be, how does he fit in on an early extension deal? And I just, I guess we'd really have to see some play from this year to see him on the field a lot for him to be your early extension candidate, unless they want to really go out on a limb on it.
Yeah, I'm usually not a fan of early extensions unless it's really, really team friendly, So anyway, that's because a lot of times you get the early extension, even if it's team friendly, and then the player has to renegotiate the next year, like Bateman did after last year, right? Because he was on a really cheap deal. Anyway, let's not go down that tangent. Let's stay on the cornerback room.
Yeah. All right. So then we have five guys competing for either 2 or 3 spots, and it'd be 3 if the Ravens can keep 7 corners. But they have Bilal Kone. I'll just start talking about him, then you talk about another guy you want to talk about. But Bilal Kone seems to have been elevated in terms of his slot on the totem. I predict that in this game coming up, we'll see Awuzie in Tampa for some small amount of time, and Awuzie, it's not even needed. I think we'll see Kone as the very next guy up, and he'll play the rest of the first half for this team. And they won't even try and extend him into the second half because I think they'll know what they want to know on Saturday from the first half from Kone.
Yeah, interested to see how he fares. He's definitely one of the players to watch in this preseason game. The next guy would be Robinson, Marquise Robinson, who you've been high on. I've been intrigued by. I want to see what he has this game. Those two might be in competition for one roster spot, hypothetically, as sort of your outside perimeter-based corners.
Yeah, they could certainly be, and Marquise, as I've now been told that it's pronounced. You got Marquise Brown and you got Marquise Robinson, and they both spell it the same way. But anyway, right. Robinson had an incredible camp last year: 10 targets for 29 yards. Played really well, made a lot of plays. Now, it was a lot of second half football that he played. I really would like to see him in the first half against the Eagles. They've got other guys who can play the second half, but it's probably going to end up being he will either play exclusively in the second half or he'll play a crossover amount. And it may be a later game that Robinson ends up being the first half corner for the team, or even playing an extended period. But he's got the size, speed, and youth combination that they don't have in any other guys other than Kone among these 5. The rest of them all have other limitations. So. Anyway, exciting player. I hope he does it.
How would you handicap the race? But if there was only one spot for Kone and Robinson, how would you handicap based off what you've seen one-on-ones and everything?
I think Robinson has probably outplayed him, and Kone has been hurt. But I think they think a little bit more of Kone. Kone was a draft pick. You got a year 2 standing the hourglass left of 3 years for Kone. You got 3.5 for Robinson by our new terminology with the RFA year. So there's a lot going on there, but I think Robinson has probably had the better camp. I think of the two. I just think that right now it looks like Kone is elevated. There's another guy, by the way. There's a veteran we haven't talked about who I don't really believe is part of the competition, who is higher up on the who do you get into the game first list.
Yeah.
That's
well, It's a roster crunch, right? So it could be that, and one of the players could become trade bait. There's always a market for corners. That's teams are always looking for quality corners. So hopefully they all shine, and maybe EDC can flip the 8th corner or the 9th corner for some reasonable capital.
Yeah, that would be good. So we got 2 slot corners to talk about. Who do you want to talk about these 2?
Let's go to Rivers. Let's see what you've seen from Rivers, because neither of us were great fans of the pick, but I've heard some good reports.
Yeah, I think he's played very well, and nobody pretty much has played as well as Martin has. But he's played very well this camp. He's looked good on a pass rush. He's looked good like rushing off the slot, and that's that small window of opportunity that he has. Is he would probably be in dime situations, which is high leverage downs where he might be rushing the passer off that slot. And there's real value to having a pass rusher there. That he's also got his hands on the football a few times. He's been in position where the quarterback was forced to throw away the ball. I don't remember if he's had an interception yet or not, but he's tipped the ball for interception just the other day to Martin.
I heard that. I heard that.
Yeah.
I think he forced a fumble too. Maybe I think he maybe forced a fumble on somebody. I think I heard that.
Yeah, he's looked very good. In terms of plays on the ball and being around the ball and being tight in coverage and very sticky. All that's been positive. There is a question is how limited his role is. That's true, unfortunately, at both Rivers and Martin. Is they're smaller guys. They really have to play in the slot. In Rivers' case, I think the Ravens might be willing to try him in an emergency on the outside. I just think it's square peg round hole.
That's a scenario that I would like to see in the preseason. I think they should test him and see how he can manage against bigger guys that he can't necessarily press and jam very well. So yeah, I've heard good reports from Rivers. I know some folks really like his technique, and my friend Yuri, I know he likes Rivers. Is there room for two slot? Well, let me just say this: the slot blitz is a long-standing tradition in Baltimore, and it's one of the hallmarks of the defense. And it seems like there's just an abundance of guys that can do that well. Martin did it well last year. So, is there room for both Martin and Rivers? I'm not sure.
It's a very legitimate question, and if you're looking for the player who could be traded, I think it's less likely they do it with Coney or Robinson, because I think either or both of those guys could potentially make it through to the practice squad. You wouldn't be in the situation where both would, because one of them is making the team. But I think that it's much less likely that either Rivers or Martin would go to the practice squad after what's occurred. Now both of them could fall apart during the preseason, and all of a sudden, there's no obvious value for them in any of the other 31 teams who haven't been here watching camp for 13 days.
Right. Well, that's the other the thing is they're doing joint practices next week and the following, right? And a lot of times that's when trades are made, because the other team sees in the joint practice what a player's capable of, and they strike a deal. So anyway, let's move on to Longerbeam, who seems like he's on the outside looking in at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of sad, but Robert Longerbeam, that injury was probably more serious to him than it was to Bilal Kone in terms of coming back from it. And I think Kone's injury might have been more serious, but Longerbeam's situation was made worse by the injury. So unfortunate. He did he had an interception earlier during, I forget if it was camp or mini camp, but one of the two. He's been playing lower down on the totem pole without me getting myself in trouble about exactly who he's playing with. I think that's the fifth spot here is where he actually is in terms of how the Ravens think about corners. And I think they have a veteran that they would probably prefer to have in ahead of him. But tough spot for Longerbeam.
Yeah, it's how it goes. They make a lot of picks on day 3, and not all of them are going to pan out. I don't expect them all to pan out. So our Warrior, who's a tenured veteran now, I liked him a lot coming out of Penn State. I thought he was a day 2 caliber prospect. I've heard good reports from him. And if you can have Wallace and our Warrior as your top of the practice squad defensive backs, that's a great place to be. And I would almost consider hiding both of them in the preseason so they don't get poached.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. I mean, first of all, both of them, their lack of poachability is in their age. So, Warrior is 30 years old, and he did have 6 interceptions for the Lions. Now 5 years ago, I guess. I think it was 2021 he did that. And we had Kayvon Wallace has done some good things, but he's now, I think he's 29 years old. So you're talking about 2 guys who they're on the back 9, and those aren't the guys who are immediately taken. Now, if they're further attrition of roster, there's a possibility, but the notion of either of those guys being signed right away, and both of them are vested vets, so they don't go through the claim process.
Right.
So the risk of either of them really being signed right away by another team, I think, is pretty low.
Yeah. Excuse me. I don't know. Kansas City, they lost both their starting corners, and Spagnuolo has a reputation of making all these day three picks into guys people want to trade second round picks, first round picks for. But I can see KC saying, "Wow, our Warrior is really showing something, and we need a stopgap." And so, anyway, just a thought I had. I would, it would be a great place to be if those are your two defensive backs on the practice squad, and you have that organizational depth.
Yeah, and I completely agree with that. And Aurorier is the guy they would probably bring up for a game and stick him in if the alternative was like going to Marquise Robinson at the bottom of your 53 man, because he would be protected there. But
Yes.
you might very well bring up Aurorier if you had a game where you're short a corner.
If I recall correctly, they did bring him up one game last year, but he didn't log a snap. I don't even know if he logged a snap on special teams. It was an odd situation, but yeah, he's an intriguing guy for a 30-year-old. You're not going to build a room around him, obviously, but it's good to see him faring well so far.
Yeah, he's normally I'm a big fan of order of entry. Tells you everything about the actual depth chart, and you can just put all of the other crap away as coach speak. But I believe Aurorier might be the first half cornerback in the game against the Eagles. He might be a guy that they want to stick out there at first with Kone, say. I think if I'm missing anybody else. Yeah, I don't think. Well, with Tampa, maybe. We'll see how much Tampa plays.
Yeah, Tampa will probably have a couple series, I would imagine.
Yeah. All right. So now we talked about Aurorier, and then the rest of the guys are just on the outside looking in. It's Webb really is the only other guy on the roster, and he's. I don't believe he'll be on the practice squad either. The practice squad should come from among whoever doesn't make the team of the five competitors plus Aurorier.
Yeah. Webby, his son, I guess. I've heard he's had an up and down camp. He's had a few good plays. I wouldn't be upset if he made the practice squad, but I'll trust it. Obviously, Eric DeCosta to make those decisions.
Right. Now the big thing is the rebuild next year and what they're going to have to do, because they've now got maybe 3 position groups where they're going to need a rebuild next year. Inside linebacker for sure. They have one coming at defensive line, and they have one coming at corner, and those are
tight end, potentially tight end as well.
Yeah, they have Andrews next year. Okay, I'm quality of play is a real question at the tight end position, no doubt about it. They might need another pick, and they might need to just jettison either of these rookies if they don't work out, kind of thing.
Yeah,
or Smythe, or they need to replace Smythe. But they have bodies in place, like the defensive line. You have 5 second contract players, could be the 5 guys who make the 53, and that's a ugly thought.
Yeah, well, we talked about this last week. I hope they could find a way to retain at least 2 of the 3 younger guys on the D-line. Tight end, I saw Jonas, this was 2 days ago, I think, so this might not be totally accurate, but Smythe was the only tight end that had a 15-yard plus completion in the entire camp and this was 2 days ago, I think. He had
interesting.
The tight ends had a grand total of 1 completion of 15 plus yards, and it was Smythe.
So here's the good thing. Jonas is doing more to chart the throws than anybody at camp. So he comes to camp with a notebook that has a field layout on it, and unfortunately the numbers are in the wrong spot. But he's otherwise able to chart. Is it outside the numbers? Is it between the numbers and the hash? Just the same way that if you look at my defensive articles and look at any plays that are in the kind of the racing form notes. You'll see that 2 bracket or a 3 bracket, and that tells you which of the 5 segments of the field the thing is. And so Jonas is doing that, and he created some sort of a spread chart for those. And I don't think Hibner's had a 15-yard grab yet. I think Andrews might have had one today.
Okay.
But Cuevas, I don't believe he's been close, but in terms of over 15 yards for sure, he's right. And one of the frustrating things about the tight end group has been all of the rookie tight end targets, or the vast majority, have been these short little out routes and at the line of scrimmage routes and 5-yard turnaround routes that you're not really testing them. And they've also had a hard time catching the football, which has made it that much worse. So it's been an ugly performance by that group.
Yeah, well, you want to see Andrews get back to that, seam routes, corner routes. That was like the hallmark of his kind of production, was that corner route from the right hash for all these years. So we'll see how he rebounds.
All right. Okay, so we're through the cornerback group, we're through the safety group, and we're going to talk about the inside linebacker group in part 2 of the show. But I always appreciate doing this show with you, Vas. How can people talk to you online if they'd like to about football?
Ken, my pleasure as always. Always enjoy talking ball with you, my friend. I am on Twitter X at Vasilis Lerikos, VASILISLERIKOS.
All right. We have a huge mailbag coming for you in the second half. We're going to get to it, as much of it as we possibly can. We appreciate your questions. Use filmstudymailbag@gmail.com. I think that's the easier place. I can take them at hashtag filmstudymailbag on Twitter if you're used to that. But it's a little bit more difficult, and we might miss you. In the mailbag address, we won't miss you. And that's something we look forward to. Thanks, as always, for listening. For Vas Lerikos, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next time on Friday Morning GM.